In the quiet roads of the upscale Beverly Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles, a sports car engine roars, interrupting the silence in the summer of 2015. When residents of the quiet neighborhood reported the case, the police chased the driver, who turned out to be a Qatari citizen from the ruling al-Thani family. It was later revealed that he was a brother of Qatar's ruler.
Kill you, bury you in the desert, and kill your family.
I knew that I needed to escape the country, not just the compound. I needed to get out of this situation.
In 2009, Doha commenced efforts to enhance its image through the world of sports. Investing in motor racing was one way the Qataris did this. Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad al-Thani, the son of the Emir of Qatar at that time and a brother of the current Emir, was entrusted with the task. Sheikh Khalid took a different track, violating US laws and rules. When the police chased him for threatening the safety of residents in Beverly Hills, he lied to the authorities and fled the US to return to Doha.
The Beverly Hills Police Department says the owner of that Ferrari is Qatar national Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad al-Thani. This morning, the State Department told investigators al-Thani has left the country. The other big news today has to do with diplomatic immunity.
It's against the federal law for someone to claim diplomatic immunity when they don't have it. So we're looking at that, and then we're also looking at the reckless driving. What we need to do is complete that investigation.
This was how US citizens came to know the Emir of Qatar's brother, who was supposed to enhance Doha's image for American and European audiences through motor racing sports. Instead, his image came to be associated with scenes of violence and torture. Khalid bin Hamad, described by British media as a reckless boy, was a reflection of the ongoing power struggle between the brothers within the palace.
Sheikh Khalid embodies the corruption of his entire family. He's a 36-year-old individual who claims to own a major holding company, including defense company activities, yet is much better known for his playboy activities, for racing, and for getting into all sorts of legal shenanigans. Now, how does that image transfer into professional running of a major company and of defense operations? That is highly unlikely. Whatever he is doing, it's not running the company. He is misrepresenting himself in that capacity. He is enriching himself at the expense of something else. What that company is actually doing is completely unknown, and it should be investigated if we want to get to the bottom of how Qataris actually run their operations.
A WikiLeaks cable dated 2012 revealed that conflicts between the sons of the former Emir Sheikh Hamad started when the Emir appointed his third son Jassim as crown prince in 1996 and angered his elder and half-brothers Meshal and Fahad. Sheikh Jassim was crown prince for 7 years, but like his father, who had deposed the previous Emir in a coup in 1995, he sought more power. According to the cable, Jassim's ambition led Sheikh Hamad to remove him from the post and appoint his elder brother as crown prince in 2003, moving him from the Olympics Committee to the Emiri Diwan. Amid family conflicts, Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad was embroiled in criminal lawsuits that haunted him in the US courts. In one Florida courtroom, they are studying Sheikh Khalid's case, which began in 2015.
Unfortunately, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and the story does not end there. Qatar and its royal family managed to corrupt everything they touch, from financial institutions to media and lobbying and NGO operations. In terms of media, they have purchased and acquired a number of companies in the US and other countries. One example, the most obvious example, is the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos' Amazon and does not seem to be suffering financially at all. What do I mean by corruption in this case? There seems to be a strange link between Washington Post and Qatar's charity, Qatar Foundation International, which had hired an American foreign officer to run some of the media-related operations for it.
In this investigative story, we met those who worked with Sheikh Khalid, who revealed new details for the first time.
We ended up getting basically that company moving, and then he had the Ferrari incident in 2015. He went dark on me for about a year. I didn't hear from him at all for a year. Later I found out the reason why. He was basically summoned to come back home because of the Ferrari incident in Beverly Hills. Shortly into that, providing security services for him and his family. I had a team of guys out there. When I first got out there, you do your normal evaluation of security protocols, personnel, who's there, any viable threats, your normal threat and vulnerability assessments on both him, his family, as well as the rest of the entourage.
So he worked for him in a personal security capacity, and he worked for him here and in Qatar. And during his employment, there was various trips taken. He accompanied Sheikh Khalid around the United States, London, Qatar.
The first person that he asked me to kill was in regards to a debt owed. And this person apparently had incriminating photos of Sheikh at some parties and some events in Los Angeles, some private parties. And so his intention obviously was never to pay the debt. When he asked me to do that, I told him quite simply, given his state of mind, that I would handle it my way. Obviously you want to get the full story, and so I established communication with this gentleman and found out what it was all about. And he gave me a little bit of the backstory about Sheikh, his behavior prior to me coming there, and why there was a debt owed. At that point in time, I said, look, I'll take care of it. I'll make arrangements to get you paid, and then we should be good after that. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Pittard claimed that Sheikh Khalid also asked him to kill a second person.
He was upset in both circumstances. And that obviously leads to, you disobeyed me. You're not a yes man. And I'm not a yes man when it comes to asking me to do unethical or illegal things.
Agents, people who have worked for Qatar in various capacities and whose work in human rights always seems to reflect Qatar's foreign policy agenda, criticizing its enemies and adversaries, but touching very lightly, if at all, on Qatar's own misdeeds and abuses. Which brings us to the question of Sheikh Khalid, of course, and his most recent involvement in what appears to be a series of crimes, and his pressure on American citizens to be involved in those crimes and to silence them from speaking out. That is also absolute corruption of the worst nature.
I'm not a medical doctor. I generally have a pretty good read on people and how they are in their behaviors. He needs psychological help. He believes he lives in a different world than he's actually in. It's very, very familiar with someone who has never been in combat, never been in war, never been in any type of situation like that, but they romanticize about it through television. And that was very much his MO. He believed, because he watched SEAL Team 6 religiously, that he was a SEAL and that he had connections to the agency, to CIA, and all these kinds of things.
Pittard returned to Qatar shortly before the relationship between the two soured.
Matt was working private security over in Qatar. That was part of his job, was to continue with security, but also to provide training to some different agencies in Qatar. So he was over there training some different individuals in law enforcement and Qatari law enforcement, and working for Sheikh as private security.
Really enjoyed their team, really enjoyed working with their people at PTI. And it was a good fit for me and for what I was doing and for what they were looking for. So in that regard, I kind of had a back plan going on of how can I continue to help, but get away from Sheikh Khalid and his antics and behaviors.
In Doha, Pittard found that a US citizen was being held in detention and psychologically abused. He was able to help free the American with the help of the US Embassy.
He received a phone call requesting his assistance at the Majlis, a private home of Sheikh. And he was told there was an American being held against his will, and that they were the only person that knew that could potentially assist. And so Matt was asked to help, and did help move this person from the property and then throughout Doha until he was safely removed from the actual country. It was a very dangerous situation. He's alleging that there was threats made to his life. This individual that he helped was jailed twice at Sheikh's request. Matt Pittard had to himself go to the jail, obviously do a welfare status check on this American citizen, engage with various our government agencies to assist. And then he himself was sought after by Sheikh Khalid and his employees.
Sheikh initially tried to get in communication. When he was unable to locate us, he got in communication with the other American. The other American, again, trying to see the good in something, whether it was by use the term willful force. He went willingly, or by force, got back into Sheikh's vehicle and ended up back at the palace. That's when things escalated even further. And he believed that he was going to be killed. I got a phone call from another person inside the compound who was hiding out in the bathroom and whispering, "Matt, you need to help him. I don't know what they're going to do to him." At that point in time, Sheikh had already confiscated this other American cell phones previous to that, and saw that I had been communicating with him and that basically I was helping him. And at that point in time, that's when Sheikh called me, and it was roughly, I think it was like 11 something at night. He called me and threatened to kill me and bury me in the desert. His exact words were, "You backstabbing piece. I'm gonna kill you, bury you in the desert, and kill your family."
Sheikh Khalid became angry and was now wary of his bodyguard's actions, and Pittard said the Sheikh held him prisoner.
Put me up against the wall, patted me down, took my cell phones, took any personal equipment, anything that I had on me, took it off me. Then I went in and met with Sheikh, and he had his CEO present in the room. So it was just the three of us in the room. And he said, "So what do you," he said, "So what do you," basically it was like, "So what do you have to say for yourself? Why didn't you come to me?" I said, "Because in your state of mind," and as soon as I got mind out of my mouth, he cut me off, pointed at Khalil, his CEO, and said, see? The reason why he did that, because over there you can't accuse somebody of being something. You can go to jail for that. especially in al-Thani. And then I sat back and I looked at him. I said, help save your life, and this is how you treat me. Save your life, and then this is what happens. And he just looked back and kind of sat back a little bit, and he's like, you had to bring that up. And then he kicks back a little bit more. He goes, bring me the documents. So he brings in some new documents, and then he pops his throw back, lifts his legs up, put them both on the coffee table, and taps his Glock 26 on his right leg, and says, just in case you decide to get frisky. He never pulled a gun on me. Had he pulled a gun, it would have been a very different story, and I probably would not be here telling you this story.
Pittard did manage to leave the residence of Sheikh Khalid in the Qatari capital, but his personal belongings were taken from him. Sheikh Khalid was involved in another case with his paramedic, Matthew Allende.
I was called to work with Sheikh Khalid because he had previously overdosed on narcotics. And they realized quickly, Matthew Pittard actually had basically told me that, he has this type of problem, with basically drug abuse, and that we need a paramedic to be present at all times because he has this habit of, partying and so forth, and, things get out of hand. Now, clearly there was, previous overdose. When I got to Qatar is when I really saw a tremendous problem with prescription drugs, prescription narcotics to be particular, opioids. He would basically wake up, in the morning, and I would see he tried to kind of keep it covert. I wasn't the one dispensing those medications, but he always had, a pack with those types of, prescription narcotics. And I would see, him take those pills and so forth, and then see his state of mind change into someone that exhibited basically signs of, narcotic use, slurred speech, his actions. He wasn't himself, after the use of the drugs. And I can basically see through my experience that he was maintaining this type of high.
He worked for Sheikh here in the United States and then in Doha as well. And he was working in a capacity of a paramedic, so he cared for Sheikh's medical needs. And he alleges that he had to request permission to essentially do anything, including to leave. He's an employee, so he's, this is a country where you should be able to move freely.
There was many times where I had to place a pulse oximeter, which is a medical device that I had at the time and brought to Qatar, to make sure there was enough oxygen in his blood while he was passed out, because now you have the determination is this person sleeping, or did they pass out and, because of the actual drugs, which was the case a lot of the times. But he had firm instructions: make sure that I am safe if I am sleeping, and make sure that it's basically not because he's ceasing to breathe and so forth.
This particular backpack, I carried a little bit of medical supplies for first responder type situations, medical dressings, trauma, if anything were to happen, car accident, gunshot, that type of thing. I carried that stuff in here, as well as some of his personal effects, everything, passports, IDs, cell phone information, electronic. The only thing that was left in here was pretty much one of the secondary.
What's that?
This is Narcan. This one's expired because it was issued at the same time, and this was when they were actually prescriptions, so you had to get a prescription for these. But this is like the one that we had to push on him to revive him. And so this is just one of them that's left that I still had. There was other things like tissues.
Was he injecting you stuff?
Not to my knowledge. I never saw him inject himself. Not to my knowledge.
Now, when you said that there was this incident and you resuscitated him?
Correct.
What was that?
It was an opioid overdose. I don't know what drugs he was actually using, what he was currently on. I just know the end result was an overdose from opioids. Whether they were pills or some other form, I'm not sure exactly what, but this is what's used to typically counter an opioid, which a heroin.
Sheikh Khalid imposed full control over those around him. Allende said that he would often work around the clock and was only given 1 day off after 3 weeks of work.
Even sometimes when I would get off, say, 20 hours. Sometimes 4 hours, someone would knock into my door because where I stayed was right below his room. Literally the second story, he was on the third story. The servants from his, majlis would come down and knock on the door, wake up from sleep. Sheikh needs you. And then I'd go back and Sheikh, what's going on? Nothing, sit here. That's it. And I would be with him sometimes for another 10, 12 hours.
On his day off, he was ordered back inside when armed guards said Sheikh Khalid had changed his mind.
He was very reluctant to allow me to leave. And by the time I had gotten down to the gate where the guard was, the Emiri guard rather, he says, "You're not going." Sheikh says, "You're not leaving." And I said, "Or what? I can't leave? He just told me I can leave." He says, Sheikh says, "Change his mind, I'm not going." And I said, I'm an American. Like, you can't keep me here against my will. This wasn't part of any type of agreement that was made. And he just continued to deliberate and very firmly, and the soldier was armed, so it was very intimidating, because he's of course carrying a firearm and responsible for the security of that compound, and saying, "You're not going." One of the other, I guess you would call it chief butler, or basically is kind of in charge of Sheikh Khalid's servants, was present also, and basically agreeing, you can't go anywhere. He says you're not leaving, and so forth. To the side of where basically the guard house or whatever that is next to the gate, there's a 5.5 foot kind of wrought iron fence. So this is where between that and the actual wall is where they keep the security guard, or a security dog rather. So I had just, after about 20 minutes of deliberation with the guard, realizing that there's no way he's going to allow me to leave, I decided to leave on my own. So I ran off. The guard, I was in better shape at that time. The guard was in not so good of shape. I knew that I can outrun him, and I can probably climb faster than he can. So I hurtled over the 5.5 foot fence, about so. It was about eye level. And I used the dog kennel to, where it kept the security dog, got on top of there and got on top of the perimeter wall and jumped off. And when I had jumped off the perimeter wall, instant pain on the right side of my body, collapsed on the floor. I was unsuccessful, clearly. Shattered my right foot. And that's when the guard had made his way around through the front of the gate, along with the other staff member. And they gotten a hold of me and dragged me back into my quarters and put me, back there. So after a night in pain and so forth, they said Sheikh wanted to see me. So at that point, obviously anybody in that situation would feel complete anxiety as what's going to happen to me now. So I literally hopped, because there was no other devices. I hopped on one foot and got up to his bedroom where he was, and he looked at me and he says, "What's up, Spider-Man?" you tried to climb the wall?
These two individual plaintiffs are asking for accountability through the court system in the United States. They, in addition to very physical injuries, were also not paid on time. And as a paramedic, you also realize that your day-to-day job duties may not be what they were yesterday, because that's the nature of the human body and the human interactions that you have, someone's health, that type of thing. So these two gentlemen were employed in a capacity where a little bit of flux in their job duties, but it would never, should have, and could never rise to the level where you're being held against your will in a foreign country, and then someone is chasing after you and telling you if you don't turn somebody over that you're a fellow American, that you're helping be removed from the country in a safe manner, that if you don't turn another person over, that you're going to be killed.
There are several issues here. First, let's be honest with ourselves. Most of the human rights activists in the US have been corrupted by Qatar, and I'm working on behalf of Qatar. So we have seen very little campaigning on their end since this story broke last year. In over a year, none of these human rights NGOs have launched any sort of independent investigation into these allegations. And if he has done that to a few Americans, you can be sure that he has done to many others from many other countries, quite possibly. Nothing has happened, whether he paid them off directly or whether they're simply afraid of severing their relationship with the family, we don't know, but it's quite suspicious. So leaving that aside, then our only hope remains the judicial process, the law enforcement, the US system, and perhaps an investigation by US Congress.
Allende left Doha with a damaged foot, but in the US, a news story began to unfold. After the paramedic returned to Los Angeles, he found that his girlfriend, Abby Han, had been raped and beaten. Allende accused his former employer of ordering the assault. The police said there was no evidence the Qatari royal was behind the assault, but said they would look into Allende's allegations.
We filed in the Middle District of Florida, and we filed, at the time, Sheikh Khalid was a plaintiff in his individual capacity, and then he had a few of his companies that were also a part of the lawsuit. After the lawsuit was filed and made public, various individuals came forward that had worked for Sheikh and his companies.
In a new case, Sheikh Khalid is accused of killing his wife's driver in Doha. Terry Hope, who worked for Sheikh Khalid's Al-Anabi racing team, said he witnessed the driver's murder.
So this employee, the plaintiff the new plaintiff in this suit, was working for Sheikh in his Majlis home. They were sitting at a table going over some job duties related to racing. This employee worked for him in a couple different capacities, including the race cars. And apparently the plaintiff is alleging that somebody walked in, spoke to Sheikh in Arabic. Sheikh appeared to be very irritated and agitated, and grabbed a weapon and told my client, hop in the car, we're going for a drive. My client said, I don't want to go with you. He could tell that he was upset. He could tell he had a firearm. He felt very uncomfortable. And he got in the car with him. The guards and Sheikh physically punch and assault this man in front of him. And this man was speaking in Arabic and English, the man that was being assaulted, and the plaintiffs alleged that he was telling Sheikh, stop, please stop, I'm so sorry. He was bleeding from his body, his head, and obviously 3 grown men attempting to assault someone. He appeared to the plaintiff to be completely battered. And then the plaintiff alleges that Sheikh pulled out a gun, a small arm, a pistol, and turned around and handed it to my client, the plaintiff, and told him, shoot him. And my client looked at the gun, and looked at the man and looked at Sheikh and said, "I'm not shooting him. I think he's learned his lesson," and handed the gun back. And then some very serious allegations that my client is making is that he was then killed.
The prosecution attorney tried 6 times to communicate with the Qatar embassy in the United States to obtain an official response to cases against one of its nationals, with no response.
I don't know if betrayed is the right word, but when you put your faith in somebody to look after your safety and well-being and your their family, which is very important, and then you turn around and ask me to take somebody else's life, it's not an honorable thing.
He needed to know that he has control over you and basically has dominated you. I've learned that from being at his side. That's his behavior.